Well, hi, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to Breaking News for our second time today, Saturday, May 11th, 2024. And as always, we have new stories for you that have come across the wire that have something to do with what the Bible says our world is going to look like at the time of the end. You really can't make this stuff up. Now, this first story I am going to do is literally one for the ages. I don't know if you've heard this one yet. Most people haven't, but I think it's so telling, and it's one I believe you'll want to pass along to a number of people. All right, now let's get right to it. Israeli politician denounces Joe Biden's threat to withhold needed weapons. That's the headline, number one. Don't threaten us with cutting off aid to give us our principles. I'm not a Jew with trembling knees. I'm a proud Jew with 3,700 years of civilized history. Nobody came to our aid when we were dying in the gas chambers and ovens. Nobody came to our aid when we were striving to create our country. We paid for it. We fought for it. We died for it. We will stand by our principles. We will defend them, and when necessary, we will die for them again, with or without your aid. That Israeli politician said some really fiery things to Joe Biden, didn't he? Yes. Do you know who it was? Was it Benjamin Netanyahu? No. Benny Gantz? No. How about one of the right-wing Israeli politicians that's always in the news? No. You know who said that to Joe Biden? Prime Minister Menachem Begin in the year 1982 in a closed-door meeting. Now, let that sink in for a moment. In a closed-door meeting in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Biden had threatened Begin with cutting off military aid for Israel's offensive campaign in Lebanon. That sounds familiar? 42 years ago. And Begin had that to say to him, responded with fiery outrage. And as the story goes, it's from National Review. 42 years later, Joe Biden has learned nothing. But we have learned who Joe Biden truly is. That he is doing exactly what he threatened Begin with over 4 decades ago suggests that Biden's actions in pledging to withhold weaponry for an Israeli offensive into Rafah, however surprising they might be to some, are drawn from a long-standing outlook towards Israel. In other words, Biden threatening to cut off aid to the Jewish state if it takes measures against its enemies is a feature rather than a bug of his decades-old policy. So this is not Obama speaking. This is not the senility of Joe Biden. This is who this man is. He's an anti-Israeli politician and an anti-Israeli human being. 42 years ago in a closed-door meeting, Senator Joe Biden at that time threatened Prime Minister Begin with cutting off the weapons that Israel needed to defend themselves in Lebanon at that time. Amazing, isn't it? Nothing new under the sun, is there? Incredible story. It's a great story to share with others, but speaks volumes. Headline number two, Biden told, this is from Tom Hughes. Tom told me this today. He's passed this along to me. I haven't seen it anywhere. It's from Caroline Glick, supposedly, in a podcast you did. Caroline is our favorite author. If you watch me for any amount of time, we love her. But anyway, supposedly, she reported on her podcast that when Israel went to buy munitions from Germany, the Biden administration called and canceled their order with the Germans. And now she says Belgium is refusing to send spare parts for Israelis F-35s. Now, I'm passing this along, assuming it's true, but should anyone be surprised? And interestingly enough, I told Tom, it's exactly what we warned about yesterday, if you recall. Said, look, once Biden, stops the flow of weapons to Israel, the ones they need, what's going to stop other Western countries from doing that, where Israel buys its weapons? And seemingly that's taking place right now. So we are not surprised that Biden got the ball rolling with his refusal to let Israel have these bombs that they need. And again, if you weren't with us yesterday, the bombs that they need are to destroy empty buildings that were Hamas's, headquarters and things like that. Whatever Israel does this, they tell the citizens, the people in the building, to get out, get out, get out. They need to destroy the building. They make sure no civilians are around. And yet, if they're not allowed to hit them with these big bombs, they need to destroy these facilities. They have to send their own people in there to do it, to wire up dynamite or whatever other munitions it might be. And the sad thing is, Hamas has all these buildings booby-trapped, knowing that Israel's going to come in, and soldiers have already been killed trying to destroy these buildings that need to be destroyed. But Hamas has gotten first to the building, booby-trapped it, and because Israel is not allowed to use these bombs that would take care of that, Many other Israelis will die that normally shouldn't have. And as we've said before, the war has dragged on 3 months longer than it should have there in Rafah, and that's because of the slow walking of Joe Biden with all the restrictions he's attempting to put on the United States. So this is not something we're surprised with. Headline number 3, the White House says, we're watching the operation in Rafah with great concern. White House National Security spokesman John Kirby says the U.S. wants the Rafah crossing reopened immediately. White House National Security spokesman John Kirby told reporters yesterday that the U.S. is watching Israel's operation in the southern Gaza city of Rafah with concern and wants the crossing open immediately. We're obviously watching with concern, but I wouldn't go so far as to say we're seeing what we've seen here in the last 24 hours connotates or indicates a broad or large major ground operation. On the talks for a ceasefire and hostage release deal, Kirby said in person have concluded for now that with no deal, there's no deal. But the United States, and here's the key, the United States says he believes remaining gaps can be surmounted. Earlier on Friday, Axios reported that Israel's Security Cabinet approved Thursday night. We talked about this. The expansion of the area of operation of the IDF in Rafah, which started yesterday, continues today. Sources familiar with the plan claim that this would be, now listen to this, a measured expansion that does not cross President Joe Biden's stated boundaries for Israel to operate in Rafah. So I guess, according to this story, if it's true, Israel has to operate with one hand tied behind their back. Now, we know the U.S., as we've been reporting here, has long been vocal in its opposition to an Israeli operation in Rafah. On Wednesday, Biden warned that he would halt shipments of American weapons to Israel if Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu orders a major invasion of the city of Rafah. Wonder what a major invasion would be. Remember he said Vladimir Putin, they wouldn't get upset if there was a minor invasion of Ukraine. Biden said that. It's almost like, well, go ahead, Putin, come on in. So anyway, you can't make this stuff up. So according to Kirby, the gaps can be surmounted between Hamas and Israel. Well, listen to this next story and see if you think that's the case. Headline number 4, Hamas says, no budging from already rejected hostage deal offer as the Cairo talks break up. The terror group claims the ball's in the hands of the occupation after team decamps from Doha while insisting it will not make any concessions. Egypt says flexibility needed on both sides, but Kirby says, well, we assume something can be put together. That means what? Israel will have to make the concessions? Don't you think they've conceded enough? Anyway, again, we are not surprised by the position of the United States on this. And now, finally, story number 5, Biden administration says Israel may have already used U.S. weapons illegally in Gaza. Notice may have. New State Department report said it is reasonable to assess that U.S. weapons have been used by Israeli forces in Gaza in ways that are inconsistent with international humanitarian law. The Biden administration said on Friday that it is reasonable to assess that U.S. weapons have been used in ways, again, inconsistent with humanitarian law, but stopped short of officially saying that Israel had violated the law. Just assumes it's true or just throws it out there. The report, which is drafted by the State Department, said the investigations into potential violations are ongoing, but noted that the U.S. does not have complete information to verify whether the U.S. weapons were specifically used in alleged violations of international humanitarian law. Given the nature of the conflict in Gaza, with Hamas seeking to hide behind civilian populations and infrastructure and expose them to Israeli military action, as well as the lack of USG personnel on the ground in Gaza, it is difficult to assess or reach conclusive findings on individual incidents. Nevertheless, given Israel's significant reliance on U.S.-made defense articles, it is reasonable to assess that defense articles covered in NS-20 have been used by Israeli security forces since October 7 in instances inconsistent with its obligations or with established best practices for mitigating civilian harm, the report said. The report also did not find that Israel has withheld humanitarian aid in violation of humanitarian aid to Gaza in violation of U.S. law. Now, have you ever heard anything more ridiculous? They say, well, given the nature of Hamas that puts, civilians in harm's way in front of where they're firing rockets, in front of schools, kindergartens, where they fire the rockets. That's what they do. They go into mosques, kindergartens, hospitals, and fire rockets from there, where there's civilians there. And if there's, when Israel responds to that. If there's any collateral damage with the human beings, it's all Israel's fault for doing this. This is an age-old tactic. This is not something new. The PLO did that in Lebanon. Speaking of 1982, when Biden was wanting to withhold the weapons from Israel at that time, I was in Lebanon in 1982 when that war took place, and we were in Beirut for a day interviewing a couple of Lebanese people. It was really an interesting situation there. At the border, they made you sign all these documents that said, your family's not going to sue Israel if you get blown to bits there. Unfortunately, we didn't. We had to sign all these things. And it was quite an interesting experience having a Katyusha rocket fall fairly close to the little van that we're in. But the bottom line was 1982 in Lebanon, Israel needed the weapons. They eventually got the PLO out of there, but nothing new under the sun. And now what we see, and basically in 1982, that was the first time I learned about it in interviewing people, that basically what they would do, they would use civilians and put them in harm's way. Soldiers were giving us illustrations, which they were being shot at. They attempted to return fire, but then they saw there was a civilian, standing in front of the window, so they couldn't return fire. But in many cases, you don't see the civilians there. So it's a terrible, terrible situation. But this is how these people fight. Anyway, summing up, Israel continues to fight in Gaza, but seemingly still with one hand tied behind their back because they don't want to make Joe Biden mad. They don't want to go too far. The U.S. seems to be looking for them to do something wrong so they can tell them, I told you so. And of course, our top story, Joe Biden has not changed in 42 years. He still wants to deprive Israel of needed weapons so that they can't best defend themselves against murderous Hamas. However, Biden does not want Israel to have that victory. And first Senator Joe Biden 42 years ago, now President Joe Biden. Literally, there are no words, are there? All right. I'm Don Stewart. If you haven't gotten our book, 25 Signs, we're near the end, that explains what the Bible says about all these things are going to happen. Please do it. It's from our website, Educating Our World. It's a free download. It's all our material is free. Educating Our World is the website, and it's under the subject of Bible prophecy, where we have a dozen books on the subject of Bible prophecy, and questions such as the rapture of the church, the Jews, Jerusalem, and the coming temple, Ezekiel 38, 39, invasion, and many other great final Antichrist, many other important last day stories. All right, until tomorrow, Lord willing, I'm Don Stewart. Thanks for watching, and may the Lord, as always, richly, richly bless.